KTM and BMW just introduced the kind of ownership riders hate, where the bike is yours, but the best parts of it are not, unless the payments keep going. The hardware can be sitting on the machine from day one, yet your access becomes a renewable permission slip. That means the purchase price stops being the real price. The real cost shows up later, quietly, month by month, and it can follow the bike into the used market like a shadow. Watch till the end, because the resale trap is where this gets real. The feature lock model confirmed. In recent model updates, both KTM and BMW confirmed that certain rider assist and performance functions would no longer be permanently active at the point of purchase. Instead, they introduced what they describe as a feature activation model tied to digital licensing. On select models produced in 2024 and 2025, items such as advanced riding modes, dynamic suspension adjustment, heated components, and quick shifter enhancements may require an ongoing payment to remain active. The manufacturers did not hide the policy, but the details were embedded in configuration tools and dealer documentation rather than emphasized in large promotional language. Official statements describe the change as flexible access to optional capabilities, allowing riders to enable or disable features according to preference. The language avoids the word subscription, instead using terms such as unlock, activation package, or digital service extension. The hardware itself is included in the motorcycle at the time of assembly. What changes is whether the software allows the rider to use it without an additional fee. Rumors have exaggerated the scope of what is affected, suggesting that core safety systems are disabled. At present, confirmed reports indicate that baseline braking and fundamental control systems remain operational. The gated features involve expanded functionality rather than the elimination of standard equipment, which leads to a practical question few riders asked at first. If the hardware is already installed, what exactly does ownership now include? Are these parts already installed on the bike? Inspection of dealer documentation and teardown footage confirms that, in many affected models, the physical components are present regardless of activation status. Electronic suspension modules, heated grip elements, quick shifter sensors, and advanced traction control hardware are assembled into the motorcycle during production. There is no difference in the mechanical build between a fully activated configuration and a restricted one. The distinction lies entirely in the digital permissions embedded within the control unit. Traditionally, optional equipment required separate ordering at the factory or installation by a technician. If you selected upgraded suspension or heated seats, additional parts were physically added. Under the new arrangement, one production configuration can serve multiple trim levels, reducing manufacturing complexity. The same wiring harness, control module, and hardware platform support different pricing tiers depending on digital access. From a manufacturing standpoint, this simplifies inventory and reduces assembly variation. From a mechanical standpoint, nothing about the engine, frame, braking components, or core drivetrain changes. The motorcycle remains mechanically identical. Only certain software-controlled behaviors are restricted or enabled. Understanding that distinction matters. A rider is not buying an incomplete machine in physical terms. Instead, access to some functions is governed by code rather than by metal. Understanding physical installation versus digital permission is essential to evaluating value. A motorcycle can be mechanically complete while functionally restricted, which shifts the discussion from engineering capability to software governance and how that governance affects daily operation. Once that reality is clear, attention naturally shifts toward the arithmetic behind those digital permissions. If this breakdown is helping you see what's really changing in motorcycle ownership, take a second to like the video, subscribe for deeper industry analysis, and share your perspective below. Your experience matters more than marketing spin ever will. What does this add? Over 5 years? Subscription pricing varies by feature bundle and market, but dealer disclosures indicate monthly fees ranging from the equivalent of $15 to $30 for certain activation packages. Some manufacturers also offer annual plans at slightly reduced rates. For the sake of clarity, consider a mid-range estimate of $20 per month. Over 12 months, that totals $240. Over 5 years, the sum reaches $1,200. If multiple feature groups require activation, the cumulative cost increases proportionally. A rider opting for 2 bundles at $20 each per month would reach $40 monthly, $480 annually, and $2,400 across 5 years. Compared with traditional mechanical upgrades, the contrast becomes clearer. A camshaft installation or suspension revalve may cost a similar amount up front, yet once installed, those components remain permanently part of the motorcycle. The subscription model spreads cost across time rather than concentrating it at purchase. Some riders may prefer lower initial pricing with optional activation later. Others will calculate long-term expense differently, especially when ownership extends beyond 5 years. Purely from a financial standpoint, the model converts optional features into ongoing operating expenses rather than fixed capital additions. Long-term cost rarely feels significant in monthly increments, yet extended ownership multiplies small figures into meaningful totals. Viewing subscriptions across multiple years provides a clearer financial picture than evaluating them in isolation. However, expense alone does not define ownership, particularly when a motorcycle eventually moves to its second or third caretaker. If you're thinking about keeping your bike longer, look in the description for the gear and accessories that reduce wear, fatigue, and surprise costs. Resale complications in a licensed era. When a motorcycle equipped with digitally activated features is sold, the transfer process becomes more complex than a simple key exchange. Current policies indicate that activation status may not automatically transfer with ownership. In some cases, the subscription remains tied to the original purchaser's account. The new owner must create a separate profile and decide whether to continue paying for those features. That arrangement introduces variability into resale value. A seller advertising fully enabled riding modes may need to clarify whether those modes remain active indefinitely or only while a subscription is maintained. Prospective buyers may factor potential ongoing fees into their offer price, especially if the motorcycle is several years old. Traditional depreciation models assume that installed equipment retains partial value in the used market. Under a licensing structure, value may depend on digital access rather than mechanical presence. A motorcycle that appears fully equipped could, in practical terms, operate as a base model without renewed activation. For riders accustomed to mechanical finality, that shift represents a procedural change rather than a technical failure. Ownership now includes digital credentials alongside title paperwork. Ownership transfers traditionally rely on title and physical condition. Introducing digital licensing adds an administrative layer that future buyers must navigate, potentially influencing confidence during private sales or dealer trade-ins. With the mechanics and math established, a broader inquiry emerges. What motivates established manufacturers to pursue this path at all? Profit margins in a plateauing market. Global motorcycle sales have fluctuated over the past decade, with growth in some regions offset by contraction in others. In North America and parts of Europe, unit volume has not returned to earlier peaks seen in the early 2000s. At the same time, the average age of buyers continues to rise, narrowing the incoming pipeline of first-time purchasers. An aging customer base often purchases fewer motorcycles over time, and replacement cycles lengthen accordingly. Manufacturers face increasing development costs as regulatory standards expand. Emissions compliance, advanced electronics integration, and safety system refinement demand larger engineering teams and longer validation cycles. A single platform redesign can require years of research, testing, and certification before reaching showroom floors. Unlike high-volume automotive producers, motorcycle brands operate on comparatively smaller production runs, limiting their ability to spread those costs across millions of units. Profit margins per motorcycle must therefore absorb a growing portion of research and compliance expense. When one-time sales plateau, companies explore ways to create steadier revenue streams. Recurring income from optional digital services can smooth quarterly fluctuations and reduce dependence on seasonal sales spikes. Viewed strictly through financial statements, recurring revenue converts unpredictable retail demand into a more stable ledger entry. From that vantage point, the appeal becomes easier to understand. Manufacturers operate within financial constraints that are often invisible to consumers. Revenue diversification strategies typically emerge when traditional sales growth slows, not necessarily from hostility toward customers. Once steady income replaces reliance on single transactions, the commercial rationale begins to reveal itself. How dealers fit into the 𝐼𝐸 subscription model? Local dealerships represent the final link between manufacturer strategy and rider experience. Under traditional sales structures, dealers rely heavily on initial vehicle margin, service labor, and accessory installation. Subscription-based features introduce an additional revenue category tied to activation and renewal management. In certain markets, dealers receive a portion of the activation fee or ongoing subscription commission, creating incentive to promote these packages at the point of sale. Activation may occur during delivery, with sales staff guiding buyers through account creation and feature selection. Service departments then handle software updates, troubleshooting, and digital diagnostics related to licensed functions. Unlike mechanical upgrades that require parts inventory, digital features rely primarily on software access and administrative oversight, potentially increasing profit per service hour without significant physical stock investment. For dealerships operating in competitive markets, incremental revenue from subscriptions can offset thinner margins on motorcycle sales. The arrangement also encourages ongoing engagement with customers, who must maintain contact to manage or renew feature access. From a retail standpoint, the model strengthens customer retention through digital connection rather than solely through maintenance schedules. Yet, commercial alignment between factory and showroom does not guarantee universal acceptance among riders. Retail operations respond to incentives structured upstream. When recurring revenue programs are introduced, dealerships adapt their sales and service processes accordingly, reflecting the framework established by the manufacturer. Where boardroom incentives meet everyday ownership, expectations may not always overlap. Is this just the car industry model migrating? Feature gating through digital activation first gained traction in the automotive sector. Certain car manufacturers began offering heated seats, advanced driver aids, and navigation enhancements as software-enabled options rather than fixed equipment. In some cases, hardware was installed universally at the factory, with access determined by licensing. This approach simplified assembly while enabling flexible pricing structures. Over time, subscription-based access expanded from navigation updates to broader performance features. Consumers could activate certain capabilities for monthly or annual fees instead of purchasing permanent upgrades. The model allowed manufacturers to advertise lower starting prices while monetizing additional functionality later in the ownership cycle. Motorcycle engineering increasingly incorporates electronic suspension, traction control algorithms, ride modes, and connectivity systems similar to those found in automobiles. As technological overlap grows, business models often follow. The migration of subscription logic from 4 wheels to 2 reflects a broader pattern of digital monetization rather than an isolated decision within the motorcycle industry. Observed from that perspective, the change appears less abrupt and more evolutionary. Software-defined capability has become common across multiple vehicle categories. Business models rarely appear in isolation. Industries observe each other closely, borrowing monetization strategies that demonstrate measurable success across adjacent markets. Still, motorcycles occupy a distinct place in transportation culture, which complicates direct comparison. A cultural shift in motorcycle design. Motorcycle ownership has historically centered on mechanical simplicity and direct control. Riders maintained carburetors, adjusted chains, replaced cables, and tuned engines without digital authorization. The transaction was clear. Once purchased, the machine belonged entirely to its owner, limited only by mechanical skill and available parts. Unlike automobiles, motorcycles often carry emotional weight beyond transportation utility. They represent independence, personal expression, and long-distance freedom. The cultural narrative surrounding motorcycles emphasizes self-reliance and mechanical intimacy. When access to certain functions depends on digital credentials or remote authorization, the relationship between rider and machine subtly shifts. Culturally, motorcycles are less likely to be viewed as software platforms and more likely to be regarded as personal instruments. Even when modern electronics enhance performance and safety, many riders still frame ownership in tangible, mechanical terms. Introducing subscription logic into that framework may create friction not because of cost alone, but because it alters long-standing assumptions about control. This philosophical layer does not automatically condemn the model. It simply highlights the contrast between historical expectations and emerging digital practices. Technological evolution often challenges long-standing expectations. Cultural friction does not always indicate failure, but it does signal a shift in how ownership is perceived. Whenever established norms evolve, reaction tends to follow close behind. How touring riders are responding. Among long-distance riders, reaction has centered less on principle and more on practicality. Riders who routinely cover 5,000 to 10,000 miles per year often travel through rural regions where dealership access is limited. For them, the idea that certain performance modes or suspension settings depend on active digital licensing raises logistical questions. If a subscription lapses during a cross-country trip, the concern is not symbolic ownership, but immediate functionality. Many touring riders prioritize predictability. They maintain service schedules carefully, carry tools, and plan fuel stops strategically. Introducing account management into that equation adds a new layer of dependency. If activation relies on mobile, connectivity, or account verification, riders must consider what happens in remote stretches without reliable data coverage. The scenario may be rare, yet long-distance travel is built on anticipating low-probability complications. Not all touring riders object. Some view subscription options as manageable, particularly if activation can be handled annually rather than monthly. Others question whether the added complexity aligns with the simplicity that touring motorcycles traditionally represent. Their concerns focus on continuity rather than ideology. Practical friction emerges not in online debates, but on highways where convenience matters most. Practical riding conditions expose weaknesses that marketing materials may overlook. Real-world usage often highlights issues differently than controlled showroom demonstrations. Beyond rider routines, the ripple spreads outward into the broader service environment that supports them. If you value clear analysis without hype, subscribe now. We're tracking how this subscription model evolves across brands, and the next update could directly affect the bike sitting in your garage today. Stay informed before the industry moves again. Independent shops and software barriers. Independent repair shops have long operated as essential partners in motorcycle ownership. Many specialize in suspension tuning, electrical diagnostics, and long-term maintenance for machines well beyond their original warranty period. Subscription-based feature activation introduces potential constraints. If access to certain functions requires manufacturer authorization or proprietary software tools. If diagnostic interfaces restrict access to digitally controlled modules. Independent technicians may face barriers when troubleshooting performance modes or electronically managed suspension systems. While core mechanical repairs remain unaffected, the increasing integration of software into routine servicing shifts part of the maintenance process toward authorized channels. For riders who prefer local shops with whom they have established trust, that transition can alter service planning. In some cases, manufacturers may provide subscription-based service access for independent technicians. However, licensing costs and training requirements could increase overhead for smaller operations. Over time, the balance between dealership service departments and independent mechanics may shift incrementally towards centralized control of software-enabled features. Hands-on riders who perform portions of their own maintenance may encounter similar limitations if activation status cannot be modified without official credentials. The friction does not eliminate mechanical independence, but it narrows its scope where digital systems are involved. Service ecosystems evolve alongside product design. As digital systems expand, the balance between independent maintenance and centralized authorization can gradually change. Alterations in service pathways inevitably lead to questions about durability over extended ownership periods. What happens 10 years down the road? Motorcycles often remain in service for decades. Unlike automobiles that cycle through rapid ownership turnover, many bikes pass from one rider to another over 10, 15, or even 20 years. When features depend on digital infrastructure, long-term viability becomes tied to software support. If manufacturers discontinue server access or cease updates for older platforms, certain licensed functions could become inaccessible regardless of mechanical condition. Historically, carbureted engines and cable-actuated systems required only parts availability and mechanical skill to remain operational. Even fuel-injected models from the early 2000s continue running, provided components can be sourced. Subscription-dependent features introduce a layer that is not strictly mechanical. If a server framework is retired, reactivation or transfer of digital permissions may become complicated or impossible. Manufacturers typically maintain support for active model lines for several years after production ends. However, predicting software continuity beyond a decade is difficult. Riders evaluating long-term ownership must consider whether subscription-enabled functionality will remain stable throughout the life of the machine. For some, the concern is theoretical. For others, especially those who keep motorcycles well past the initial purchase cycle, longevity weighs heavily in decision-making. Mechanical durability remains measurable through maintenance records. Digital durability depends on corporate policy. Durability is not solely mechanical. Digital continuity now plays a role in determining whether certain features remain usable over extended ownership periods. Over time, confidence in longevity shapes perceptions of reliability and brand stewardship. Brand identity under subscription pressure. KTM built its reputation on performance-focused engineering and competitive off-road pedigree. BMW established a legacy around long-distance touring capability and mechanical refinement. Both brands cultivated identities rooted in engineering confidence and rider trust. Subscription-based feature access intersects with those identities in complex ways. For performance-oriented riders, KTM's appeal has traditionally rested on mechanical capability rather than layered digital licensing. Similarly, BMW touring models earned loyalty through durability and integrated design aimed at sustained travel. When access to certain capabilities becomes conditional, some riders perceive a subtle departure from established brand narratives. This does not automatically translate into widespread rejection. Many customers may accept the arrangement as part of modern vehicle evolution. However, brand equity depends on consistency between messaging and practice. If subscription policies are interpreted as prioritizing revenue, stability over rider autonomy, perceptions may gradually shift. Heritage functions as more than nostalgia. It represents accumulated trust built across decades of product experience. Changes that alter how ownership feels can influence future purchasing decisions, even among riders who initially accept the new model. Brand perception accumulates over decades, shaped by consistent product philosophy. Strategic pivots can influence how that history is interpreted by future buyers. Reputation influences buying patterns, and buying patterns ultimately determine how the market responds. Will other manufacturers follow? History suggests that once a revenue model proves workable, competitors study it closely. The motorcycle industry has repeatedly demonstrated a pattern of adoption when one manufacturer introduces a profitable shift. Anti-lock braking systems, ride-by-wire throttles, traction control algorithms, and electronic suspension began with limited application before spreading across multiple brands within a decade. What starts as an experiment often becomes normalized through incremental acceptance. If subscription-based feature activation generates predictable income without significantly reducing sales volume, rival manufacturers may evaluate similar structures. The logic would not be ideological, but financial. When quarterly reports reflect recurring digital revenue that cushions seasonal downturns, executive boards notice. Particularly in markets where growth has plateaued, steady cash flow becomes strategically attractive. That does not guarantee universal adoption. Some brands position themselves around simplicity and may resist subscription integration to preserve identity. Others may introduce hybrid approaches, offering permanent unlock options alongside temporary activation packages. The degree of adoption will likely correlate with each brand's customer base and long-term strategy. Whether the model remains limited to specific manufacturers or spreads more broadly depends on market response and profitability data over several years. Market replication often follows demonstrated profitability. Competitors evaluate results before committing to similar structural adjustments. If subscription logic expands across the industry, attention may turn toward how regulatory frameworks interpret digital ownership within vehicle law. Could regulators intervene? Legal frameworks governing vehicle ownership traditionally address physical property rather than digital permissions. When a motorcycle is purchased, the buyer receives title and full mechanical possession. Subscription-based features complicate that clarity by separating hardware ownership from software access. Regulators may eventually evaluate whether permanently installed components should require ongoing fees for full functionality. Consumer protection statutes in several jurisdictions distinguish between ownership and licensing. If riders argue that hardware sold as part of a motorcycle cannot reasonably be restricted after purchase, lawmakers could examine disclosure practices and contract language. Courts have previously addressed disputes involving digital rights management in other industries, establishing precedents around transparency and informed consent. At present, no widespread legal challenges have reshaped subscription-based vehicle features. However, as digital control extends into performance functions, debate may intensify. Regulatory bodies typically respond to sustained consumer complaints rather than isolated incidents. Should a substantial portion of buyers contest activation policies, investigations into fairness and disclosure standards could follow. Any potential intervention would likely focus on clarity of communication rather than prohibiting digital features outright. The legal question centers less on technology and more on whether buyers fully understand what rights accompany purchase. Regulatory attention typically arises when consumer understanding lags behind contractual complexity. Transparency becomes central in evaluating fairness. While regulation evolves gradually, market forces often move faster in shaping which designs survive. Mechanical simplicity as market advantage. Economic trends often elevate simplicity when complexity increases elsewhere. As newer motorcycles integrate layered digital systems, older models, characterized by mechanical independence, may become comparatively attractive. Analog platforms that rely on physical controls rather than software activation offer predictability. Maintenance depends primarily on parts availability and mechanical expertise, not on remote authorization. In used markets, buyers frequently weigh long-term operating costs alongside purchase price. If subscription fees accumulate across several years, the total cost of ownership may influence demand toward motorcycles without ongoing digital charges, models produced before widespread feature. Gating could see renewed interest among riders who prioritize permanence over flexibility. This dynamic does not imply a rejection of modern technology. Many riders appreciate electronic assistance and refined performance management. Yet, markets often support parallel segments, with one emphasizing advanced systems and another valuing straightforward engineering. Mechanical independence becomes a differentiating characteristic rather than merely a nostalgic preference. From an economic standpoint, scarcity can elevate value. If future production increasingly integrates subscription logic, motorcycles that operate entirely without digital licensing may represent a distinct category with stable demand. Value in secondary markets responds to perceived risk and predictability. Simpler systems sometimes gain appeal when complexity increases elsewhere. Such shifts in demand inevitably reshape how ownership itself is perceived. What does owning a motorcycle mean now? For decades, motorcycle ownership implied direct control over every installed component. Keys unlocked ignition systems, and tools accessed mechanical adjustments. Digital integration has gradually layered new dimensions onto that experience. Connectivity, ride modes, and electronic management systems offer measurable benefits in performance and safety. Subscription-based access extends that evolution by separating physical possession from certain digital privileges. Ownership may now encompass two parallel elements: mechanical custody and software authorization. The former remains tangible and transferable through title documentation. The latter depends on account management, licensing terms, and corporate infrastructure. This dual structure alters expectations without necessarily eliminating traditional control. Riders still maintain engines, tires, and suspension hardware, yet some functions operate within a digital boundary. The broader question is not whether technology should exist, but how its governance shapes rider autonomy. Manufacturers seek financial stability and operational efficiency. Riders seek clarity and continuity. Between those priorities lies a shifting definition of what full ownership entails. As digital systems become more embedded in performance platforms, the industry must decide how to balance flexibility with permanence. Definitions of ownership evolve alongside technology. Shifts may occur gradually, becoming noticeable only when viewed against earlier assumptions. When future riders look back at this period, will they see subscription-based features as a brief experiment or as the moment ownership quietly evolved? Motorcycles have always meant control. You buy it, you ride it, you own what's bolted to it. But when features become permissions, ownership starts to look like a contract that can be changed after the sale. KTM and BMW may call it activation, packages, or flexibility, but the direction is clear: more hardware, more gates, more recurring cost hiding behind a low monthly number. If you've seen this in the real world, comment what model and what feature. Like the video, subscribe, and stay ready, because the next shift won't be announced loudly.